Friends, it's the old Potwin pastor. Some of you noticed I was out of town yesterday and you had questions about where I was. Well, I was just on a road trip. And I know there were a couple of you tried to give me a call yesterday, and I didn't realize until I got back last night. I had my phone on the airplane setting. So I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. It was getting kind of late when I figured that out. But no, we didn't have any crisis going on yesterday. We were just in a motel in a land far, far away. So now we're home and all is well. Wanted to read you something this morning. We've kind of gone through our list of things to think about, the higher things when things get tough. Thought I'd read a passage of scripture that was written by someone who was experiencing tough times. Bet you've heard this passage. It goes like this. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou dost prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. 23rd Psalm. If you've been to very many funerals, you've heard that read many a time. It seemed like a particularly appropriate psalm to talk about for a few days when I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning and it's thundering outside. That psalm was written by David when there was a lot of thunder, if you will, going on in his life. It was a real stormy time for him. It's one of three psalms that he wrote that all kind of fit together. There's the 22nd Psalm, the one that just precedes that, the 23rd Psalm, the one I just read, and the 63rd Psalm were probably all three written while David was in exile from his own home in Jerusalem. I don't know if you've ever had problems in your family. Maybe maybe you had a son or a daughter that just seemed like they just couldn't get it. Maybe they struggled with drugs or alcohol. Maybe they struggled with inner demons. Maybe they were just angry with you for various things. Maybe it just seemed like you had parents that were too demanding or perhaps abusive or um, didn't understand your needs. I don't know if you've ever had those kinds of issues in your family. No, a lot of folks have. Boy, David had all kinds of issues like that in his family, and he had a son who just wanted him dead. His son's name was Absalom, and Absalom had seen his dad do some things that he thought were terrible things. His dad had done some things that were terrible things. And so Absalom, when he got to be a man, he got a number of followers and he tried to overthrow his father, who was the king, led a rebellion. And at one point, Absalom's armies were so strong that they were able to force David and his army out of Jerusalem. They fled into exile. And while they were away from Jerusalem, there are a number of songs that were written, mostly by David, but some by his priests, about how much they missed being home, how much they missed being near to the house of the Lord. I've used all three of those Psalms that I told you about, Psalm 22, Psalm 23, and Psalm 63 in different kinds of services. I've especially used them when the person who had died was a person who'd been a faithful lover of the Lord, and then in their last years had been unable to fellowship with the people of God. They'd been confined to a nursing home or confined to a bed, or for whatever reason, they'd been unable to come to this house of worship where they had fellowshipped with other people of faith throughout most of their life. And it was as though the world had exiled them for a time. And and then they died, and then we had a service, and they got to come back to the church. And I've used these psalms as a way to talk about the dreams and the hopes of people for coming home when they're exiled from the people of God, and how God brings us back together in that final gathering when we're all brought back home. 22nd Psalm I often use on Good Friday. That's the one where Jesus begins to sing, my God, why have you forsaken me? Probably not a lot of singing in his voice when he sings it at the point that we're most familiar with it, because he was on the cross at that time. The 63rd Psalm is one that goes with 44th Psalm, in which the psalmist, the writer of the song, talks about how they would love to come back through the green valley to the city of Jerusalem after being forced out through the valley of death. But the 23rd Psalm is one that many of us memorized when we were young people. And it talks about our longing to be always in the presence of God. Yeah, that's a really great promise. It's worth taking a look at in some depth. So that's what we're going to do for the next few days. We're going to take a little deeper look at the 23rd Psalm. It's probably the one we say the most often, and because we say it so often, sometimes we don't really stop and take a look at what's in it. So we're going to try to do that. Hope that you come along for the ride. Hope you have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.